So if you've watched the news lately, something that you're going to find out is everyone's freaking out about AI again. And they're freaking about AI in a lot of different ways, per usual. But now they're mostly concerned about this big, scary AI named Mythos that will come for your data in the middle of the night and attack you, and nobody can stand against it. And we're now living in the age of Ultron, depending who you ask. That's what we're going to discuss today and a couple other fun things here on Legitimate Cybersecurity. Thanks for joining. As always, my name is Frank Downs, and with me is Dustin Brewer. We have a very, very rare occasion. We actually were able to make someone enjoy themselves so much, they came back to the show. Welcome back, Jason Casey. For those of you who are unfamiliar, a PhD and the current CEO of Beyond Identity with an incredible pedigree and background of all things cyber. It's great to have you. Thank you so much.
No worries. Thanks for having me.
So, Jason, what we want to talk about today, when we want to start it off with, is get your take on the whole Mythos discussion. For listeners or viewers who are not familiar, first of all, thank God that you have not been bombarded. You've not been in the torrent of news hell that we've been in. Claude, Anthropic, using Claude, came up with a new version of AI called Mythos that they're using that specifically is able to, as they describe it, hack anything. Look at all the different code that's available, and it'll analyze the code and come up with several 0 days rapidly that didn't exist before, thus creating a new capability for cyber attacks. And everyone's freaking out because it's taking a process that would take a human a rather long time and basically condensing it. And the example that they like to use that I've read most in the news and that we've seen is that they put it into basically the equivalent of a box and said, you stay in there, and closed all the doors, connected it off from the network, and it still was able to hack its way out. And so as a result, everyone is kind of doing the 5 alarm fire. Jason, is this really as scary as everyone says it should be? And what are your thoughts as to the implications of what we're seeing with this?
Well, let's see. Many layers. Definitely going to have to go onion on this one. So let's start with the external cynic.
That's a fun place to start. I'm on board. Let's go.
When let's look at how a lot of these companies are treated, which ultimately has to do with multiples on revenue for market cap, whether it's a public or private company valuation. Over the last 12 months, the stock market, rightly or wrongly, has decided that if you're an AI company, the sky's the limit. The rocket ships to the moon. You're going to get your 40x plus multiple on revenue, or heck, you don't even need revenue. You're pre-revenue. You're a pure play, right? So like we're going to go full on. And unfortunately, that's a deep cut too. That also reminds me of my age.
I love that though that you brought that up first, because did you see what is it, Allbirds, that shoe brand?
Yeah.
Suddenly said, we're done, no more shoes. We do AI now.
Dude, Russ Hanneman is making a lot of money right now as a consultant, helping people.
And all I could think of was the terrible dad joke where I'm like, shoes to AI. I guess you could say that's a pivot none of us saw. So it's insane. But yes, sorry, continue. Honestly, you know what? Legitimate Cybersecurity is now an AI company. Investors, there we go. There we go. Tell all your
Now you can
friends.
get money.
But sorry, go ahead, Jason. Continue.
Yeah, so the markets have decided that if you're an AI company, you're gonna get an incredible multiple, and if you're not, we're gonna take you down a notch. So all of these traditional tech blue chips mean something. So I probably shouldn't say blue chips, but like your tech stalwarts, right? Palo Alto, CrowdStrike, Zscaler, etc. They're now forced with, how do I explain to the market that either I'm still relevant and AI doesn't destroy me, and or no, that's too hard. I am an AI company too, right? And I look at so I start with that, and I realize like everyone has this motivation to kind of paint themselves as an AI company, and you can kind of see the results, right? At RSA, everyone is doing AI security, everyone is shadow AI discovery. Like, well, what the hell? What's the difference now? So that's kind of one pressure in the market. The next pressure is you've got Anthropic. Like in all of this, I actually just see genius marketing on Anthropic's case. But like you've got Anthropic, who's clearly coming from behind, but with strength, trying to get in front of OpenAI, realizing that like enterprise is really where they can drive material revenue quickly and almost pull off an Amazon style play where, yeah, they're going to spend a shit ton of money, but they're going to do it in a way to build really, really sticky revenue with large enterprise, with mid-market companies, and with startups that have a future of being someone big. And so now they have this new model, right? And by the way, they're going to have a new model every 6 months.
Yeah.
If they're doing their job right, this new model is always going to be more capable. This new model is always going to open up an adjacency, right? And this new model, we can look at it with two lenses. We can be skeptical and we can say at the worst case or at the best case, it's really, really helpful in terms of reverse engineering. It's really, really helpful in terms of vulnerability scanning. It's really, really helpful in terms of code scanning, right?
See,
Or we can
Dustin?
take
Sorry. Yes. Keep
or we
going.
can take the worst case view, which is it's 1997, August, I forget the exact date. What is it? August 7th, 1997. Dum dum. The Terminator
Yeah,
day.
of
Oh, yeah.
Skynet is now alive and it's coming for us.
course.
Clearly, I don't think that's actually true. I think it's a really, really useful tool. I think Anthropic is playing a brilliant strategy where they realize that, like, hey, all these tech blue chips have to rebrand themselves. I could loop their marketing teams and their marketing budgets behind my effort because I'm actually showing leadership in this right now. And I can make it exclusive, which is going to make everyone start to feel like it's FOMO, and then just start pumping out news story after news story of how like the world's going to end tomorrow if you don't jump on board. And like when you dig in, and so here's where I might be a little over my skis. I'm mostly relying on other people, but a couple security researchers I follow on Twitter, they looked at a lot of these claims and on surface, they're like, yeah, they're making discoveries that have existed for a while, but they're not exactly exploitable and, or they're not, they're, the immediate impact is not as devastating as the headline of the article might make you feel. Right. So on one hand, I think that's a win for marketing, right? Like they're doing their job, they're getting the attention, they're pushing Anthropic forward, which is hats off to them. But is it going to end cybersecurity as we know it tomorrow? Absolutely not. Maybe for the people who aren't paying attention.
I do want to know, like, I think, another thing to add, and I want your opinion on this as well. Uh, you know, for me, when I read like what this thing does, I'm like, oh, great, this is going to like emphasize SAST, SAST a little bit more, right? And maybe companies will actually start doing it, or at least doing it correctly. Do you think that these types of marketing campaigns, and I think all three of us kind of are on the same page with this. It's a marketing campaign, right? This type of marketing, we've seen it in the past with like exploits, right? So Meltdown Inspector, for example, Heartbleed, they gave him these cool names. They gave him these like, kind of marketing, like little like Meltdown Inspector was like a little ghost guy, and Meltdown was
Yeah.
like something that was dripping, and that caught the attention of CISOs and CEOs and everything. They're like, we need to watch out for this kind of stuff. Do you think this is kind of having the same effect now too, where it's like, you're going to have CEOs and CISOs who are actually going to start caring about SaaS a little bit more, and maybe start implementing those things? So kind of going away from the it's going to take our jobs to no, actually it's going to create more jobs because, or it's going to, it's going to solidify, if nothing else, maybe not create more jobs, but it's going to solidify procedures and processes and all that kind of stuff when it comes to
That's a hard
doing true
that's a
security.
that's a hard one. So like for a CISO to really change priorities, they need to get money, right?
Okay.
And right now, money and budgets are focused on AI productivity pushes. They're not focused on any sort of rear guard defensive action. And I think that's going to be a tough battle for them, even with everything that's actually going on. I think they stand a much better chance saying something along the lines of like, "Hey, we're getting left behind because our big AI native projects have been paused because of governance. I now have a way of unpausing it with this new mindset, this new process, this
Sure.
new architecture."
Yeah.
Or, hey, we've been blindly accepting all of this risk because we can't afford to be left in the dark. I now have a way for us to establish governance without slowing down R&D. I think those are viable pathways to budget for the CISO. And so if they can turn that into action that they may have not been able to do in kind of just traditional eat healthy and exercise activities of the cyber operation, then yeah. I don't think it's one for one though. I don't think Mythos is going to create a budget for non AI related like AI defense is going to be hard, I think still.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yep.
100%.
100%. Yep.
Another part that I thought was a little, and Dustin and I discussed this a bit, I thought was interesting. and I want to phrase this carefully because we have a lot of friends in this industry. You see some of the informative information, that's put out there by leaders in cybersecurity that we all know and love. And the thing that was interesting for me in this instance was it was a lot of gloom and doom, but it's still one of like we can see it for what it is here, right? It's something that, yeah, okay, yes, AI was eventually going to be used like this, and we knew it. We've actually already seen it, right? There's a lot of pen testing companies that leverage AI to help enhance their pen tests, for example.
100%.
And now Anthropic mentions this, and you have huge names in cybersecurity who are like, this is bad. Everyone, we need to get on the wagon, almost at like state and national level. Who I know, and I know they know. What you see a lot of different things in a lot of different rooms that Dustin and I glimpse from time to time. Why are they chicken littling so hard over this one? Like,
Who was it? It was like an advisor to Bill Clinton. It's like waste no crisis or let no crisis go to waste. And the idea behind the quote was every time people get worked up, I'm going to use that energy to solve a real problem through some sort of mental jujitsu. And so, like, look, I can't read I can't read these people's minds. I don't know actually what's in their head. But if I were in their position, I would absolutely be trying to use the energy of the moment to advance the cause.
okay, so like one of those take every opportunity you get to get things pushed forward, no matter what the hype around it is, kind of thing.
Yeah, like the I think this is incredibly important the larger the organization that you're responsible for leading, right? Or the larger the organization you have to operate within, and especially in terms of policy and like government. What you want to do is never going to be the objection or the principle of the other party or of the larger group, right? It's kind of on
Uh,
you to
yeah.
figure out how do you take advantage of what's going on in the moment. How do you actually advance some part of your plan based on what's going on in the moment that's helpful to, right? Like the person on the other side, the one who's actually writing the budget, but also kind of connects to the practical needs that you know actually has to be advanced. So, like if I were one of these people, and I would absolutely try and take advantage of the moment right now for what is the most efficient in my cyber program, and I would try and lean in on something that checks the AI
Okay.
box, right? To give that policymaker something to actually talk about. But look, I maybe this is what happens once you've spent 20, 30 years doing this. But do you really want to fight the emotional energy of tens of thousands of people? Or is there some way to take advantage of some amount of that energy that already exists? Right.
That's a great perspective on it that I didn't think of. That trying to redirect it and use it in order to improve things rather than because I'm like reading some of these research papers. I'm like, I've met you. You you're smarter than this. I do not understand. Like, So that's encouraging. Where do you see? I like the idea of using AI to improve cybersecurity overall. And I've found that it is often a reactionary. So, it is a reactionary, no matter how often you try to be proactive and having good control so no incident ever happens. It's the incidents that happen that end up getting things done. Where do you see this evolving to? Do you see this kind of like I've watched over the last year as Google, and Google did it better first, in my opinion, where Google thoughtfully integrated AI into its services to help with emails and documents and all that. And I'm seeing Microsoft slowly, in spite of themselves, get better at it, which is good. Like I feel like they're going to take the long way every time. Sometimes, what have you seen as far as AI integration? We talked about some of the tools. Do you think I'm specifically interested in your thoughts on blue teaming? Because it's always fun to talk about red team. I'm going to use this like with Mythos. Everyone likes to talk about Mythos and how it's going to be used to get you. How do you think this is going to be used for blue teaming and securing things beforehand?
Um, I've actually got a couple friends running small companies now. Wisby is actually one of them where they're doing this exact sort of thing. So they're taking a play on a combination of like first party and third party vulnerability management and response, and trying to see um, how can they actually use intelligent AI tooling to do the equivalent of like tier one, tier two analyst work. Like, is this real? What's the mitigation strategy? Should I actually bump it up? Like, I want to say I have at least two friends that are kind of in that area. A guy named Stoyan Stoyanovich and Chris Cochran. They're solving slightly different problems, but they're both kind of running at that problem. We use it on our side as well in two different ways. So, like the way we like to think about AI is well, we think of it in a couple different ways. So number one, I can use it to build things that traditionally I would have bought. Number two, I can use it to operate things that traditionally I wouldn't have had the staff to operate, or I would have had to hire a large staff to actually operate. So those are like AI operations is more about like, think of it as like custom skills and hooks and plugins for Claude Code specifically around codifying these kind of workflows that you are very comfortable with, right? When you're running incident response, for instance. AI build, we've also done, and our security team has done this in terms of like really up leveling incident triage and filtering and automated response. The trick there in where they're exercising a lot of their judgment is trying to break the problem down into probabilistic versus deterministic problem sets. So, for instance, if a problem can be solved deterministically, you're really using the AI system to generate code because that code will deterministically operate every time and always give you the same answer for the same input, right? Same inputs equal same outputs. Right. Like I'm sure you've all experienced this when you sit down with Claude and you say, hey, Claude, I want you to go do this thing and look at all these files and whatnot. Claude gets lazy because it's been trained over how we behave, right? And we're lazy, which is why
And it's
code is
not
always
just Claude either. I've had that same problem with ChatGPT, or I'll say that actually does exist in the file, and they go, "You're right, but I didn't read it."
yeah. It's a byproduct of how these models are trained and reinforced. And so what the models are good at is you can actually coach the models to recognize what should the process be. But then rather than having the model run the process, you have the model essentially extrude the process as a script. And then you just have the model out. So that's what I mean by like determinism versus probabilistic. So I know there's a little bit of a divergence from your question, but go with me for a minute.
Yeah, keep going.
Imagine a control flow graph, right? Like of a program in your mind. And it's not even a real program so far. It's really just like this interactive workflow that you've kind of come up with Claude or Gemini. It doesn't really matter, right? Pick your favorite LLM. And so at each of these nodes, work is getting done. And if you're doing it all native in an LLM, each one of those nodes, we're going to just call them probabilistic. But the problem that node might be working on isn't necessarily a probabilistic problem, right? All deterministic problems can be worked on probabilistically, but not all probabilistic problems can be worked on, right? It kind of goes in one direction.
Yeah.
So for instance, apply this function to every file in this directory is a perfect example of a deterministic problem. I don't need to call out to a probabilistic parrot to try and solve that problem. I want an enumerative loop over everything that's in that system. So that's a perfect example of a node that originally was probabilistic that I was kind of working through with Claude. How do I want this workflow to go? But now I can convert this node from like red to green, where red is probabilistic and green is it now extrudes it as a script. And rather than Claude trying to figure it out on the fly, it just always calls this script. So
Yeah.
now imagine you work through that whole control flow graph using that kind of mindset. Like, what task is too big? And I want to split it from one node into maybe a couple of nodes, right? So again, kind of classic control flow analysis type of thinking. And then because skills can call skills, you don't need to wrap it all up in one skill, right? We just know good modular thinking is make things small and atomic. And then once it's as small as it can be, what's deterministic versus what's probabilistic? Anyway, where I was going with all of this is when you start going AI native and you start saying, all right, what can I build that I would have traditionally bought? What can I operate that I would have traditionally not had the staff for? This is the mental tool that you're actually going through in both the build as well as the operation. And so I think that's really the frontier of what changing your business architecture looks like in terms of like truly going AI native. And we are pushing really, really hard on that front because we think that will create new surface area of risk. We think that will create new behaviors or new opportunities to kind of catch things early, right? Before they actually go into production and whatnot. And at least that's how we think about trying to get ahead of the curve.
It. I like that a lot because I feel if once you can determine which is deterministic versus probabilistic, you can very much decrease. I'm speculating here, but that'll decrease your error rate too, as far as output.
100%.
Because
100%.
it's just like, okay, run this. It's less compute and less room for error when it gets to the probabilistic element of, say, potentially that flow. And I think the temptation for a lot of people here with AI is viewing it as kind of magic, where if I just write the perfect prompt, I won't have to do anything else. Right. And it's, I think that's a really good, it gets back to, there was a guest on, I think it was the Ezra Klein show a few weeks back, who's one of the, who was leading AI development at one of the research universities, I think. And he mentioned he's changed now the way he interacts when he, for example, to build a tool, when he's using it to build a tool, instead of trying to describe the tool right and then modify things here and there. First thing he'll do is have AI interview him to gather software requirements to build a rec sheet, right? That he can then provide, go from there. So that's pretty awesome. I like that a lot. Thank you.
I do wonder though, like it does seem like for blue team specific, like specifically blue team scenarios where you might have something shift from, you know, that dynamic prompt or that dynamic, I don't want to say condition set, but something along those lines into something that's more of a script, right? So let's speak like, you know, snort rule, right? So like, you know, your AI is your AI agent is on a system. It notices a pattern of something happening. Maybe it's during a red team exercise, and you know your you know Splunk didn't catch it or whatever. Didn't, you know? I think I said snort. So so probably just follow along with that. And Elastic Stack or whatever it is it's alerting on the back end of that didn't sense it, right? And so your AI says, okay, well I'm going to write a rule for this then. And so your AI goes, writes the rule. Now it's, you know, now it's codified. Now it's in the system. However, the next time the penetration test happens, they use something similar, but they do it in a different way, right? And so, like, do we run the risk of, if we are going to, you know, do we run the risk? I guess, is it just going to write another rule then? Or is it worth having something that's there that's going to be changing along with the attack? If that makes sense.
So what you're describing is actually just the classic problem of specificity versus generalization, right? Like, does the model generalize? Does the rule generalize?
Yeah.
And so I don't think AI, this is one of those things where like the problem still persists regardless of how we decide to solve the problem. We just have to be aware of it, right? So I would argue if I'm dropping a rule in whether it's Snort or BPA, regardless of whatever system, if I'm dropping some sort of conditional scenario and I'm classifying it such to where it is so precise, it's only ever going to pick out one instance of the universe of attack types. Maybe it's useful for like regression testing, but it's kind of hard for me to think it's certainly not generalizable, right? And that's where I would say maybe you're using AI wrong if that's how we're using it to generate dynamic rules. I would think of it more of like, I would want to use it to generate more of a patterns of behavior, right? So like, is there a certain pattern of reconnaissance that occurs before like, you know, the initial detonation or initial access? And like, can we elevate that can we detect that pattern quickly and codify that pattern? I don't know. I would think about it more like that. Actually, yeah, I would think about it like that. You just kind of gave me an idea. So are you guys familiar with like the whole AI factory, software factory trends that are going on right now? Gastown, that sort of thing?
No.
Okay. So number one, definitely worth your read. It's called Gastown. It was written, I think, in January. But the speed of this world there's a variation of it that's come up pretty much every month since then. The idea behind Gastown is kind of simple though. It's look, when you first start using AI, you're using it like as a glorified search engine. And then you start, and that's like your step one. Then your step two is you start using it as a tutor on a subject, right? Then your step three is you're like, ooh, this can script and this can code, but you're like copying and pasting and it's really awkward, right? And then the next phase is you kind of graduate to, all right, I'm gonna go to a terminal experience. I'm going to actually give it access to real local resources within some sort of boundary or not, right? Some of us YOLO. And you start to realize that asking it to write code is not great because it gets lazy. It removes test cases to make it pass. Like it does all sorts of wily things because again, it's been trained on Stack Overflow. And you and I both know how much bullshit is on there, right? So sorry, I'm
Ghost of
not.
Stack Overflow will forever live on. Like everyone's talking about the decline of it. No, it's still in there. It's just infected everything now.
Yeah, Stack Overflow, the old crotchety Longbeard is never going to die now.
Yeah, never.
But yeah, so like you quickly realize you need to do what that professor was telling you about earlier. You need to actually do what's called spec-driven development, where you essentially write an interface spec, an acceptance criteria. And it gets a little bit more involved than that, but like that's kind of your phase run. And then you have it write code till it's passing. And then you look at it and you realize, all right, it passes, but do I want to maintain this? And then you kind of go to your next step, which is now I'm going to have rules on software composition that it has to pass as well. Anyway, you go through all of these tasks and eventually you realize you're orchestrating all of these things.
Mhm.
Wait a minute. Could I somehow lift myself out and have an AI orchestrator?
Right.
And that's
Yeah.
the concept behind these factories. So what they'll basically do is they'll set up this factory where you've got a QA agent and a spec writing agent and a orchestrator agent and a software architecture agent and then just software developer runners and CI runners and it's basically this orgy of token spend,
Mhm.
super chaotic, but in the end you get something that kind of works and is kind of amazing. And it's not for anyone. You shouldn't just jump into it. You should kind of go through that progression that I just described. But the reason you made me think about the software factory is I wonder if there's a blue team factory, right? I wonder if there's a blue team factory where I'm not exactly writing software per se the way these blue team guys are. What I'm actually building is I'm building both kind of a static and a dynamic layer of detection. And I'm building a capability to do kind of proactive forensics and investigation and like kind of reconnaissance.
Yeah.
And I'm doing it through a layer of orchestration. And because ultimately, you said something earlier that took me off as well. That was what I deep side on, which is like this is not magic. Like these systems still obey the laws of math and computation, and
Right.
the more we actually understand they work, the more you can actually harness it faster.
Mhm.
Anyway, that's what these software factory teams, like what they've arisen out of is they've really paid attention to how these agents work, what makes them work well, what makes them just spend your money and still not arrive at the conclusion. And they've come up with these better ways of operating. I haven't seen anyone turn that on a blue team or a red team concept yet. I'm sure they are, right?
Coming
Because if
soon
we're
to Beyond Identity, though. There you go.
There you go.
no,
No.
we're
No, we're
we're,
not
we're
doing
using
that.
we're using factories. I don't know. I shouldn't say that. Maybe my security team is doing this sort of thing because we're certainly using factories in how we actually do development. We're using it in how we do marketing. We're using it in how we do sales. That's probably a whole nother conversation. But like, yeah, we've completely reshifted our organizational structure as well as our business processes to be more like we're AI native. We don't need a $400,000 marketing stack. We literally need an S3 bucket, a static page as a data sheet. Uh, and then I've got a series of Claude plugins that basically track user journeys through the platform, track signups, all that sort of thing. Mass mailers through like what is it, SNS and AWS. Like no need for HubSpot, no need for HubSpot, no need for
I'm going to be
what's
honest.
the
I
other
won't miss HubSpot.
content
That's fine.
management system, all that stuff.
Yeah, for CMS. Multiple people I've noticed CMS is radically changing due to this. And for all of our listeners, here's terrible advice. For each node that he just discussed and sub-process, you need to buy one Apple specific Mac Mini and put CloudBot on it and just have a big stack at your desk. I'm kidding. I just feel like that's the current trend now, especially with CloudBot. They're like, I need to buy a whole computer just for it. I'm like, do you? You know, and the worst part is when they do it and then it's just, then they're just all call outs to other AIs. And I can't get behind it personally.
Look, if that's your hobby, then knock yourself out.
Well, yeah, if it's a hobby, I'm not going to knock anyone's hobbies, but oh my gosh. I'm very concerned as a day to day, as I see a lot of people in the professional field who get, what is it called? Dunning-Kruger, right? Where they're like, oh, it was staring us in the face the whole time. I just need 18 Mac minis. Guys, I'm a pro now. And it's like that, you're at this part of the Dunning-Kruger effect. Get ready.
Yeah.
So it's been
Yeah,
really interesting.
like these large models are trained like one compute node is almost $100,000, right?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
these large models, and even if you had the money, it's not easy to buy one.
Correct.
And these large models are trained on fleets of hundreds of them and thousands of them. Like you're not going to compete. Like don't even
No.
kid yourself.
I think it was Business Insider said that like companies are now buying so much from NVIDIA so far out in advance because they don't want to get put to the back of the line. That even if
Yeah.
they're not using what they're buying, they keep buying more anyway.
Yeah.
Well, memory's already like RAM has already just like skyrocketed, right? So now they're starting to like come out with consumer grade, laptops that are notebook computers and regular computers that are like 10, we're going back to the 90s here. We're going to have like, two gigs of RAM or something like that.
The new MacBook is run on a cell phone processor.
So this laptop sitting on that chair in the background, that was my version of that escapade. So I do actually fine tune small models.
Awesome.
So for instance, like voice synthesis models. Also,
Neat.
like there are, yeah, I'm sure you can guess what for. We have a small red team plugin. Large language models are not everything. Like there's all sorts of deep neural networks that are highly and the whole
Yeah.
world of scientific computing is actually using these things that are either graph constraint models or geometric constraint models. Like that's how they're actually solving like protein folding. That's how they're doing the AlphaGo stuff. That's how they're solving like advanced partial differential equations, much more optimally than like with supercomputers. But these are billion parameter, 5 billion parameter models max, right? They're not trillion parameter models.
Mhm.
So these are within the realm of mortals. They can actually be run on laptops. And the other thing too, like if you just max out a MacBook Pro, it'll do it'll literally do everything you could possibly want with essentially what is in the range of your budget and actual skill set.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I'd even say that even some of the, the minis and what is it? The Mac Pro, the M4 processor stuff can still do a lot for people. So like
Yeah.
they don't even have to go full spec.
And like I said, this is like I'm doing fine tuning on like low parameter count, like right at a billion models. Like this is not most people aren't like you don't need this to run them. You don't even need this to run small models low.
Yeah.
So as we're considering all these different ways in which AI does blend into security, I know that you guys have an interest in security and so forth. Is there anything that, Beyond Identity is working with or working on that you'd want to share with us?
Yeah. So we have just introduced a new product called Ceros. It is fresh out of the oven and smells of warm baked bread.
Well, it's already my favorite AI. Great.
So basically, do you run Claude code and are you worried about governance? If the answer is yes to those two things, you should try out Ceros.
Wow.
You can sign up for free on beyondidentity.ai. You can also go to ceros.sh, ceros.sh. We have a free tier for the offering for like your personal use or just your exploration. And what Ceros is it is a trust enforcement layer for your agent. And we say Claude Code right now because that's where we're starting. That's where the bulk of most of our customers actually are. It will expand over time, but right now it's really good for Claude Code. So the way you should think about it, think about Ceros as it's kind of almost like a virtual machine. It will execute Claude Code for you. It will establish an identity for that executing agent linked to the identity of Claude Code, linked to your personal identity, linked to your device's identity. It will figure out the device posture of the device you're actually running it on. It will run all of that through a policy engine. So, from a corporate perspective, what this allows a company to do is to understand and track all AI usage, right? Have locked down identities for all AI usage. That agent is operating inside of a context window or I'm sorry, inside of an authorization context where we can exactly control and observe all the tools it uses. So MCPs are tools, but so are built-in tools. So are backup calls. So is LSP.
Mhm.
Prompt injection can certainly come from the user, but it can also come from the results of tool calls. It can also come from the result of a hook execution. It can come from the result of a binary that's embedded in a skill. It can come
So
from
does it sanitize all those before it even gets to the to Claude then?
so we basically surface all of that so you can see it all. And it's like a typical security tool, right? The first step you want to do is you just want to turn it on and see what's going on in your environment. The next thing that you then do is you say, hey, some things you may want to restrict, some things you may want to prohibit, some things you may want to alarm on. But we go a little bit further than that. We also let you inject things. So, for instance, if you have a bunch of engineers, you want them to be productive. You want them to have the standard Claude.md setup. You want them to have a set of permissions that you have blessed. You want them to have a set of skills that you know will accelerate them on the job. You want them to have a set of MCP configurations and local tool setups that you know will accelerate them relative to your product and your company and your mission. Your developers don't have to set any of that up. We can just naturally inject it. And I know there are other ways of doing some of the things that we just described. what we've seen in the market is none of them are easy. And so we focused on making it super, super easy.
None of them are easy. But working with our clients day to day, I can tell you there is a lot. It's a nightmare. It's a nightmare for them.
So yeah, it's like a two-step install. You immediately get visibility into what's going on your machine. Because of how we do what we do, we give you the shadow AI discovery thing right out of the gate. And that works for all agents, all LLM providers, all MCP services. And we even do model discovery and model detection. The deep security analysis in terms of like skills related things, plugin related things, hooks related things, that's very specific to Claude code today.
Awesome. That's fantastic. Will it
Yeah.
protect? How will it protect me from my vacuum? The reason I asked, did you see that?
Vacuum attack you?
Well, there was a hack. I want to say 2 weeks ago from DJI.
Yeah.
First of all, I didn't know DJI made vacuums. News to me. I thought they just made other drones.
How else will the PLA know what's going on in your environment?
You joke, but a Frenchman knows what's going on in our environment because he was looking at the API and it was not fully secured. So he was able to control over 700,000 vacuums. And he realized that using the API calls that wasn't secure, he was able to then use a PlayStation controller to walk his around. It can also provide access to all the scans of your house that is there. So if someone wanted to take everything, they could to figure out what all our houses look like. Could it use some of them? Once it was discovered that some of them were compromised, there was people knew it could be done. Multiple units just activating in the middle of the night, going in the middle of the floor, and started playing creepy 1950s like Bioshock music. And if there's anything I don't want to wake up to, well, there's a lot of things I don't want to wake up to, but one of them that is squarely in that list is my vacuum, like doing its best Bioshock impression at me in the middle of the night. So
I have a hard time believing you have a DJI product installed in your house.
I do not. But I mean, Jason, we're all compromised anyway. I'm sure something's in here.
That's true.
I've got a Raspberry Pi 1 still that I'm using it for my Pi hole. I guarantee you that someone's got that figured at this point. So
You're probably right. You're probably
and with
right.
the OPM hack, it doesn't actually they don't care about us anymore. They've already got everything. So
they got everything they need.
That's there. It's interesting. I do think that I'm excited to hear that you guys are building this though, specifically because I've met more than one client that they're almost afraid of AI, right? Because they're afraid of what data will accidentally go into it. First, they're afraid they won't use it right and that they won't be able to control it right. They won't be able to sanitize it. And the concern I have is then sometimes people are more interested in never using it, never adopting it. And that's like saying, here's the internet and not making a website back in the 90s, right? Where we were all going that anyway. So having those protective capabilities, I'm excited. Also, congrats. That's a great idea. Yeah. So it's exciting.
Yeah, no, it's super cool. And I can geek out in the weeds, but at a high level, that's exactly why we built Ceros. How do we help people run towards the future safely?
Yeah.
It's great.
And how do people claw towards the future safely too when their fingernails are now hacked? Something else I want to get you guys' opinion on. There was last week, I believe, it's a company called iPolish, huge hit at CES. They have, because it's ever-changing nail polish that they advertise it as a nail polish that you can use your phone to change the color on. Now, I'm like, I don't believe that. Taking a look into it, what it actually is a bunch of little e-ink screens that people can put on their nails, which I'm now realizing people are going to end up having to charge their nails at some point. Like, I know e-ink lasts a while, but I don't want to charge my nails.
Every
Yeah, exactly.
Days. Yeah.
What they identified, though, is the app was leaking personal information all over the place, and people were able to track women off of their fingernails that were just leaking data. From your perspective, is the dimension we're living in now that this is a thing? And two, can you guys explain to me a little bit your thoughts on the security concerns there? Nothing but the best topics here, Jason. Nothing but the best. This is legitimate cybersecurity.
So number one feels like something out of a William Gibson novel, doesn't it? Right? Like, because he's so focused on aesthetics and design and clothing and fashion and whatnot. Also feels predictive and like it could have been in a novel because he also talked about the exploitation of all of this sort of data around like profiling and tracking of people and whatnot. I don't know that. I guess maybe this is the child in me, but the immediate thought that comes into my mind is I would love to use it to just send messages to people.
Yeah. All of a sudden, your nails are saying "Hi there" or something, right?
Yeah, like that. I guess that's the 10-year-old in me. That's just me.
Yeah.
So many thoughts, so many thoughts.
I mean, wearables have always been like that's always been a concern, right? Like when you any kind of wearable doesn't matter. This sure this is a little bit yeah right. I don't know how I have mine on right now, but because I think it died. But like that's always kind of been the concern is that like there's if there's going to be connectivity and there's going to be RF and there's going to be whatever if your body is going to be radiating
Yeah,
signals, then those signals are always going to be you're always going to be able to be profiled. Phones, they somewhat solved it with, right? We have randomization of MAC addresses, but even then, there still are these utilities out there that can basically profile your phone, even if the MAC address is randomized just based off of habits, right? So I can start building these like habitual profiles off of people, these like heuristics and temporal behavioral patterns that then you can say like, so for example, when you're doing a pen test and maybe you're going after a CEO, you know, can't necessarily figure out what the MAC address of the CEO's iPhone is, but you can figure out when that person leaves every day. You can figure finally get home and then finally, track them down to their Wi-Fi in their house, right? Not that I'm giving anybody ideas here, but
Yeah, please don't do that. We don't recommend it. Please don't.
I said for penetration testing. This is for legitimate cybersecurity.
Yeah, there we go.
what
But
was the what
yeah,
was the name of the old tool that is basically you had to be within like 10 or 20 yards of a target, but you would point it at their monitor and it would read the ambient RF and reconstruct the image. It had a cool name
Can't remember, but I know what you're talking about.
I know exactly what you're talking about.
and it's fairly inexpensive, right? And I think it still works. I think the technology still actually works because
Yeah.
our yeah the yeah, everything you're describing, it makes me think of that. It makes me think of, I mean, heck, even like in the Ukraine war right now, right? Like, I'm pretty sure the Ukrainians and the Russians are getting really, really good at tracking and location just through ambient electromagnetic
Yeah.
emission, right?
Right.
When people turn their phones on, when people wear their watches. And, I don't know if it's true, but if you read the news, apparently we found we helped locate the down pilot in Iran based on like the electromagnetic emission of his heart.
Right. That was crazy. That was we can find you anywhere in the world by your heartbeat. That's,
I mean,
but,
clearly
but we
they need
still
to be
can't find that down
but
Malaysian airline, by the way.
But
Something
that's I mean, so this brings up an even better point. Like, we don't even need to have wearables anymore. Like, people can just find this anywhere. So, but we're obviously giving it up on a platter. But I still think that, like, yeah, okay, the nails, cool, like whatever. But like, everybody's got this. You got to have this to use the nails too. And this is going to be way louder than any other kind of wearable you have. And people don't even care about the security of that right now. So, I don't know. That's kind of my take on it. Like when I was at DEF CON in like 2017 at Biohacking Village, and everybody's getting RFID chips, like they could pay $10, have someone
yeah.
plant an RFID chip on you. I was like, next year I'm gonna do it. Like I was totally ready to do it because I was like, who cares? Like they can get me anyway. They again OPM hack already, right? Like it's kind of done for me.
one of our friends has that
Yeah.
in his
Yeah.
and he's basically enrolled it in the Beyond Identity system.
Nice.
So we can actually do these aren't the droids you're looking for to authenticate.
There you go. That's great. That's exactly what I wanted to do with it. But then, of course, like then I didn't get to go again until COVID hit, and then COVID made fools of us all. But I always found that kind of stuff really really kind of interesting too, and that's something that's always going to follow you as well. But again, like nothing still nothing compares to these internet magic internet bricks that we have that we all carry around. Right? There's so much EMF and everything else that is like just pouring out of these things at any given time.
Yeah, no, like so you make a really interesting point. There's really what I guess I could almost think of it as two buckets, right? So one is I'm just trying to figure out, what's your pattern of life behavior, some sort of physical proximity. I can do that with both, and with how modern society is going. Like number one, you've got some piece of electronic on you, right? That I'm absolutely going to be able to track if I'm within a certain range. But number two, like every technology that we see in these whiz bang stories today, right, that gets rolled out by the agencies tends to be pretty common 10 years from this, right? So is it really that crazy to predict Sorry with the barking. Is it really that crazy to predict that the trend of it's out there and they're going to know where you are is actually going to continue? The thought probably more are like, I don't know, how do you raise the noise floor? How do you?
Yeah, and I like that idea of data pollution almost, that you
Right.
can do that in order to make it more difficult. And I think that part of it's going to be obfuscation moving forward. It's always going to be, it's going to have to be. But anyway, we are coming up on time. You heard it here. Clip your own fingernails, throw out your phone, move to the middle of nowhere. Legitimate cybersecurity. Jason, as always, thank you so much for coming. We really appreciate it. It's always great to have you. It's been an awesome discussion. If anyone is interested in what Jason talked about, they can go to Beyond Identity's website and take a look at that as well. But until next week, Dustin, take us out.
Keep on cybering.
Keep on cybering, everyone.